Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Coffee with Alain. As you can see here, I got a special guest this morning, Professor Dan Anderson, and we're going to have some fun and talk about martial arts and other things and just do a whole bunch of fun because that's what we're about here on Coffee with Alain. Appreciate everybody that joins. You know, I'm drinking out of my John Wayne cup, or one of my John Wayne cups today. And I do want to remind everybody before we get started, comment, share, ask questions, and be sure to go enjoylifesafely.com and get that newsletter. Now let's get on to what we're here today for, and that's talking with Professor Dan Anderson. Dan, could you just introduce yourself briefly to people that might not know about your martial art background and some of the things you've done?
What an insult. Nobody knows me? Unbelievable.
Not everybody that watches is a martial artist. The martial artists know who you are.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Oh boy, keeping it brief. I started martial arts back in 1966 under a green belt named Lauren Christensen, and anybody who knows Lauren knows him as an authority in real deal martial arts. But he was my first teacher. I've done karate for 57 years. In the karate circuit, I was known as a regional, national, and world champion, and rated in the top 10 4 consecutive years back when there were only 10. And then, in addition to karate, I branched off into Filipino martial art, modern arnis, from Remy Presses. And I began with him in 1980, and I continued with him until his passing in 2001. So overall, martial arts experience, I've traveled the world. I've taught all over the place. I've competed all over the place. Done really well for a 14-year-old kid from a town of 24,000. And, that didn't have a dojo, I might add. And so anyway, I've written, I think I'm on my 41st book, and I've done 50-some DVD titles. I love research. I love giving back, because I've gotten just a tremendous amount of mentoring from some very, very good people, some very famous, some not famous. And I love paying it forward. And there you go. So, in my spare time, I'm a crotchety old man who has taken up, of all things, at age 71, an instrument that's called a touch guitar. And so as opposed to, you're picking ding, 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 it's touch sensitive. So you're tap, 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 like that. And I'm a white belt all over again. And boy, do I hate being a white belt. So I think that's introduction enough. There you go. Well, and I've got my Steve LeBounty tribute coffee cup, thanks to Bob White. There you go.
Well, everybody, watches the show knows that I read a lot and I really like books. And, you just mentioned you've written, over 40 books, but there's a connection of you and I in the books. And that's this Musashi's Dakota.
Oh,
because I contributed this book and you wrote the foreword for this book.
Yeah. And let me, when I sent the picture, oh, you talk about brain dead. So I write the foreword. Yes, I write the foreword for the book, and I send him a picture. I'm on my laptop, and I go, "Oh, this is the perfect picture." I punch it, and I send it to him, and he doesn't ask anything. I think it was Lawrence Kane. Yep. He sends me the hard copy. I look at that. I'm going, no. That was a comedy picture of me doing a Master Ken thing. That was not supposed to be in there. I call him up immediately and say, "Oh man, somehow I sent you the wrong picture. Is there any way? Blot that out. Is there any way you can change that picture?" I says, "Man, we've done the hard copy on that." Says, maybe we can do on the digital, but I've got this mock mean face. My eyebrow is cocked like Master Ken. I've got my claws out there. Oh, right. Geez. I mean, I was honored to write the foreword for it. It was a wonderful thing, but and that's a full page picture.
It is. Yep. My full page picture later in the book is me at sniper school. So I had a real young picture of me when I was in sniper school.
Well, I hope you sent that to them on purpose and avoided the embarrassment that I had. But ay.
But and I'm just gonna, I don't get anything for this, but I want to give this a plug. I'm friends with Lawrence and Chris, who published this. I'm friends with Lisa, who is Lauren Christensen's wife. We
Uh-huh.
just met your
Yep.
instructor, and Wallace. And so Lisa, Wallace, and I contributed when Lawrence and Chris were writing this. Dan did the forward. If you want a book on Musashi's Dakota, this is the one to get. I mean,
Yeah, and let me back that up with it. Anything that there's only a few authors that I wholeheartedly, without any reservation, recommend. Lauren Christensen is one of them. Mark V. Wiley is another one, and then the team of Kane and Wilder are another. And those are contemporary writers. You get people like Don Draeger, which, I mean, how can you resist any Don Draeger book, etc. Robert W. Smith. But yeah, any Kane and Wilder selection, even if you are not Japanese karate. Rory Miller. Got to add Rory Miller. But yeah, any selection by Kane and Wilder, get, because it's going to be a very good book. So yeah.
I agree. I mean, I'm proud to be friends with both of them. Chris lives closer now, since when I go over to Spokane, Washington, he's real close. He's in Cheney now. So he'll come over to Spokane and meet with me and stuff when I head over there. And Lawrence, whenever I get to Seattle, try to see him. But I agree. They put out some wonderful things throughout the years, as has Lauren, as has Rory. And we'll talk a little bit more about those guys later. But while we're talking about books, I also did want to ask you, which is the favorite book that you have written and why?
Well, my favorite book, and it is more of a sentimental favorite than anything else, is American Freestyle Karate: A Guide to Sparring. And yeah, that was published back in 1980. And the thing is that, like any martial artist that wants to read something, there was something I wanted to read. However, at that point in time, all you had were the basic styles of books. You either had books on a generic thing, so you've got your basic karate stuff, you got your high block, your straight punch, you got your kata thing. You had various other martial arts books, with judo or kendo or iaido. You had your basic self-defense books, etc. But you didn't have anything that explained free fighting. And I'd scour everything, and even Chuck Norris's first book, very basic. It's not down to what made Chuck win and so forth. So it was the book I wanted to read that wasn't out there. So it's like, phooey, I'll write it. And back then I was in the printing business, so I knew what paper costs were, what it cost to produce a book, etc. So I poured my heart and soul in it, and I thought, okay, this is my one chance. And I worked on it. And to pre-frame that, I'll go backwards. Back in 1974, I had the outline set up, and at that time, Tuttle Publishing was the number one publishers of martial arts books. There was Tuttle, there was Kodansha, and there was whatever little podunk publishing house. But so I sent it to Tuttle, and they sent back, and they were interested. And so I said, okay, yeah, I'll do the pictures. Well, being a poor boy, I went cheap on the pictures. And long story short, they ended up refusing publishing the book. So we fast forward to 1979. I am in, I think, either Oakland or San Francisco or whatever. And Paul Maslach, who was the editor of Inside Kung Fu magazine at the time, I'm talking with him. Now, he had produced a couple of books on fighting and so forth, and I told him about this project. And in the tournament, and this is near verbatim, he said, Dan, you write it, I'll publish it. I said, are you sure? He said, yeah, you write it, I'll publish it. We shook hands, whammo. That was it. 9 months, 3 rewrites later, I've got the book. I send it to him. And then one of the things I've always hated about martial arts books at that time was it never showed how you got from point A to point B. You'd grab the guy here. The next thing is you got the wrist lock and the takedown here, 2 photos. And all the in-betweens weren't there. what happened while you were moving. So I had this notepad, and every single move I had a number next to. Back fist followed by reverse punch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 5 pictures. Ding, 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 ding. And I had this for every single action in the book because I did not want it to have the same flaw that all the other books had. So we get down to Los Angeles, and I've got my notepad. And the photographer, Ed Ikuda, brilliant photographer, very, very good. I lay this out for him, and I go, okay, good. Here's technique number one. It's going to take 5 pictures. Ding, 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 ding. Okay, check that off. And we went through a photo session. I think it was about 8 hours. Over 1,200 photos. We nailed the book. Due to size limitations, they had to pare it down to like 750 photos. I wish I had the originals. Oh, I wish I did. And then, we had it, and it came out. And next thing I know is I'm getting messages from all sorts of people. Dan, incredible book, wonderful book. This is required reading in my school. This is required for brown belt. This is required for this and that. Next thing. And it was my first instance of really giving back. Now, a postscript to that, which is kind of an interesting story, is that Unique Publications sold its book division to Beckett Publishing. And I had heard about this a number of years ago. And so Beckett owned the book. And my royalties are, they're diminishing, right? Until I get to a point where I'm getting no more royalties, but I'm saying on Amazon, brand new American Freestyle Karate, a guide to sparring, yada, yada, yada. So I'm like, where are my royalties? I'm not getting anything big on royalties. At best, I'm getting coffee money, but still, I should be getting something. So I investigate, and long story short, Beckett sold their books to INI Sports in California. It's like, and INI Sports was, they were beginning to republish the books. And it's like, okay, well, they sold my book to INI. I want to see what's going on with INI. So I send them an email. Very, very nice guys, very in communication. And at this same time, I had gotten fed up with no royalties, right? So now I've produced a number of books. I thought, I'm going to reprint the sucker. I am going to reprint the sucker. So I scanned the whole thing. I scanned all the pictures. And I thought, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a 2024 or 2023 or whatever year it was, a couple of years ago, update. So anything that I either change or whatever could, I put the year number, add additional stuff. There was even one point where I had to backpedal on, because in 1980, this does not work in sparring. Well, 2021 or whatever. Actually, this is when I used it in sparring. So it didn't matter what it was. And then I rearranged the book the way that I originally sent it. Case in point, I had a section on timing that got stuck way back on page 213 of the original book. And I said, wait. No, timing is supposed to go in offensive approaches. Here are your triggers when to go. The editor stuck it way back in the added information and concept sections and so forth. I made the font larger, easier to read, book larger size. Anyway, I tag with, so I'm in the middle of this project and everybody's telling me, Dan, copyright violations, don't do it. And you're going to get sued, etc. So I tag with INI, and INI, they're starting to republish, but they're going 2 things. Number one, they're saying that books aren't selling, so they're not really into publishing any more martial arts books, but we would love to help you if you wish to redo this. And they don't know I'm redoing this, right? But the second thing was that when they bought everything, Beckett had lost the contracts. When I heard that Beckett had lost the contracts, I let out in my rather timid and shy voice, ha ha, not a very loud expletive. And it's like, my baby's mine. It's back in there. My flagship book is back being mine. And so I republished it. And so it was my first karate book. It was my latest karate book. So that is, it's a sentimental favorite. One of the books that I'm most proud of, and you only asked me for one, but I'll give you two, was my latest book called Miyamoto Musashi's Book of Five Rings. Now, Musashi, okay, lived in a vastly different culture, obviously. He's in the 1600s. There's none of this bar and alley fight. I mean, they're drawing swords. They're killing people. He killed his first guy at age 13, 14, or 15. I mean, he's in 60 duels, which means there's 60 times which he could have died. And then he goes off and he gets reflective and he writes down his book of strategy, right? Now, everybody loves Sun Tzu's Art of War, which I have never been able to plow through. I just can't get through that damn thing. But Musashi wrote more of a one-on-one type of encounter thing, and that resonated. But the thing is he's speaking from a 1600s viewpoint in 1600s culture. So my book is, how do we relate Musashi's lessons to the current Y2K culture? And it was one of those that I actually blew from the book. I mean, I actually just blew it off 3 different times because I couldn't quite figure out how to state it. And then one day, most likely in the shower, which is where I get all my great ideas, whammo, it hit. Oh, let's do a comparative. Musashi says this. Okay, what can you do in Y2K that echoes what he's talking about? And I'll give you an example. Very early on, he talks about his sword is the Nito Ichi Ru. Okay, 2 swords, long sword, short sword. So how does that translate into Y2K martial arts? Well, how about developing your left and right side in an empty hand martial art? You know, most of us are right hand dominant. So let's train that left hand. Let's train that left leg. So what you have is you have 4 weapons. Okay. Now, I also trained in Arnis. And so in Arnis, you can be training 2 sticks, stick and dagger, short blade, not meaning dagger, but more like machete or bolo dagger. So you're still working 2 sides. Okay, this is where Musashi's statement of training Nito Ichiru with the 2 swords and how, you know, wielding one sword is going to be clumsy because the blasted thing is heavy, but you persist in it. And this is just taking one line out of the book. So that book is just basically Dan taking a lot, not all of, but a lot of what Musashi said, relating it to Y2K. And then it ended up morphing into my own book of 5 rings because I have 4 additional sections to it. You know, my teacher's manual, my training and combat rules, and my training and combat rules are all tongue-in-cheek. There's such as, you know, the Rolling Stones rule. The Rolling Stones rule, yeah, you can't always get what you want, but if you try sometime, you just might find you get what you need, which means you don't stick to the particular technique. You go into what's going to work at the time, etc. And I've got like 40 or so rules in there. You know, the Ghostbusters rule: don't cross the streams. And so, okay, good. Don't get your hands crossed up because they might trap you, etc. And so I've got, you know, my rules in there, and then the pillars of the fundamental pillars, the explanation of the fundamental pillars of my martial art, my teacher's manual. Okay, all the different things, how to relate to students and so forth. And then finally, a chapter called Finding Your Own Voice. And this is how somebody, I won't say breaks out of a karate style or Arnis style or judo style, but where the art becomes so much their own expression that they are no longer, let's say, classic Shotokan. They are Joe Shotokan. And then in the end, they are Joe martial art, and how it's a very natural phenomenon. And so anyway, I'm very proud of that book because it took a lot of work, but it really reflects Y2K Dan Anderson, as opposed to, let's say, American Freestyle Karate Guide to Sparring, 1980 Dan Anderson. Now, I warned you. You asked me a question. I'll give you a long answer.
Nope, that's fine. No, that's interesting. I'm sure, we just might have to have you on again, because there's so many things we could talk about.
You might ask me a second question.
Because
Anyway.
I had a follow-up. Those are books that you have written. What is an influential martial art book that you didn't write that has been an influence in your and limit it to maybe the top 1 or 2 or 3?
Okay, I'll limit it to the top 1. Influential martial arts book. There's a book that was written, cripes, 1964, something like that. It's called Secret Fighting Arts of the World by John F. Gilby. Now, when you pick up Robert W. Smith's book, his last book before he passed away, Martial Musings, what you find is Secret Fighting Arts of the World was a spoof. And it was co-authored by him, Don Drager, I think John Blooming, and some other guy. And it was supposed to be about this wealthy industrialist who has all the money in the world. He can travel. He meets all these people. And there's all these different wild escapades that he gets into, meeting these masters, etc. And the funny thing was that it was meant as a spoof, and a lot of people took it seriously. It's like, I've met Gilby. I trained with Gilby, blah, 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 right? And Gilby's this fictitious character. However, in about the 20 chapters of the different stories that he writes, there is a nugget of wisdom that's in there. He talks about, let's say, I'll just pick one chapter. The last great savant men. Okay. Supposedly Gilby meets this savant master, and the savant master is talking about kicking, and there's not a whole lot of fight in either martial arts or whatever. And then he starts talking about timing and placement. No, speed and placement, excuse me. And he starts kicking the guy's earlobe. And first he feels nothing. Then he feels more pain. Then he feels a lot of pain. Pain's excruciating. Then it goes back to very little pain, no pain. And the savant master is talking about, it's speed and placement. Now, kicking the guy's earlobe, that's, you're going to get taller from having your leg pulled like that. However, the nugget, speed and placement. Now, this is what made Bill Wallace darn near impossible to beat. The speed of his kick, but his accuracy. There was the nugget that was within that cockeyed little chapter. And it's got so many little nuggets in there that that has to be one of my absolute favorite books. I will go back to that to see if there's anything I missed. And it's such a preposterous setting, but within it, man, it's got some great stuff if you get past the BS. Well, that's a shorter answer for you.
And favorite book that's non-martial art related?
Non-martial art related. I was going to say Shogun. I've read Shogun 5 times. And Shogun's got, it's got the samurai thing in it, brilliant. But if we get totally out of martial arts, the Amber series, the first 5 books of the Chronicles of Amber by Raja Zelazny. That's another one I've read at least 5 times, and just easily written, storyline follows really well. Hero's great to relate to. It's got enough sorcery, magic, blah blah blah. Another one is Dianetics: The Modern Science of Mental Health by L. Ron Hubbard. Again, very very piercing, insightful. So if you go fiction, okay, the Amber series. You go nonfiction, Dianetics: Modern Science of Mental Health. Those are two that come to mind.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Now you have a background both in the karate and in the Filipino arnis.
Mm-hmm.
How have they differed? That maybe because I know sometimes we do things in one martial art that's sort of counter to a different martial art and makes it tougher to learn or mix them. So what did you find that might be different that was sort of made it difficult for you to do both? And then what complemented doing both in your years of training?
The first thing is that, I got lucky in that I was not trained in a rigid style martial arts, such as a very, very classic Taekwondo or very classic Shotokan. So, and by the time I met Remy Presses, I was already a national champion. So I had, let's say, unstiffened, and I was more fluid with my movements, combinations, etc. However, that being said, when I started learning arnis, there's a phenomenon that I've seen happen, and did it ever happen with me, is that once you put an implement in your hand, you go brain dead. All of your thinking goes into the implement. And I remember Professor Remy, he would tell me, Donnie, do not become hypnotized by the stick. And it's kind of like, right. And so where all the familiarity with with the punch and the kick and so forth, putting something in my right hand and hitting, swinging, etc. with that, and then using the left hand to monitor, check, grab the stick, etc., was very, very foreign to me. Now, the manner in which he taught, he was a lot more practical than, let's say, a bow staff, or nunchakus, or the sickle, or the weighted chain, and that sort of thing. Those I couldn't resonate with. But my early training had more of the staccato, boink, boom, boom, boom in it, while Professor Remy was all about the flow. One move, seamlessly moving into the next move, etc. And this is a cornerstone of Filipino martial arts. Now, by the time I got, relatively decent at it, they started going just like this, so that my karate was influenced by my arnis, but my arnis was influenced heavily by my karate, because offensive, defensive approaches, the idea of, okay, if I'm going to hit at you, I'm going to hit at you. I'm not going to okay, here's one thing. Let's say in arnis, you'll see this a lot, where the guy executes a move. Let's say he blocks and he does the stick takeaway, and then he does a follow-up by, he will step back and he will do this flourish, but they all miss. And it's high speed and it's really impressive, and he misses every time. Well, the thing is that I don't teach my guys to miss, which means the karate control comes into it, but I'm laying that stick upside your head, down on your wrist, into your throat, up into your groin, over the top for a noggin kong, ding, 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 and I'm not missing a damn thing. So we have a karate influence on my arnis, but the flow, the arnis influence on my karate. And when you end up having, let's say, the Dan art, okay, then they kind of go zip, because now it's stick in the right hand. Oh, you put it in my left hand? Oh, okay. You take the stick away? Not a problem. What Professor Remy used to drive us nuts with, what I finally get now is, Johnny, it is all the same. No, it's not all the same. It's got a stick. No, it's true. It is all the same. And it's like, yes, sir. I got it. all the same. What the hell is he talking about? You get into martial movement, it ends up being all the same no matter what you put in your hand. But it took a while to get there. I hope that answered your question. I think I kind of went off on a tangent, but
no, and I think that's interesting for people. And you mentioned Bill Wallace earlier, and
yes,
you have seen competition from back when Bill Wallace and Chuck Norris and Jim Harrison, who used to live here in Missoula, competed up until, modern day competition. How has it changed and evolved, in your opinion, throughout these years?
Oh, you're going to bring out the crabby old man in me. Back in the day, Sonny. Oh, okay. So what I'm going to prefix this with is that and one of these days I hope I find the old boxing book. I had this one boxing book, and the writer in there said there's only one thing that old boxers and old sports writers agree on, and that is things aren't as good today as they were back in the old days. Okay, so I'm going to pre-frame this with that. Now, when I grew up, the concept of control was as hard as you can hit, but you sucked it up so you didn't create the damage. Okay. And it was before the hand pads. So when I grew up, one of Chuck Norris's students, Bob Barrow, had a phrase: control is wrist deep. I was like, well, okay. And I started competing on the national scene as a brown belt. This is 1969. I went down to the International Karate Championships, and just an incredible eye-opener. It was wonderful. And then I made my black belt in 70, competed, and finally placed in the internationals in second place in the lightweight division in 72. And then I fought in the U.S. Championships in Dallas, Texas in 1973. And I'll bring up this story because this will tell you the feeling of it at that time. My first match in the lightweight division, I fight this guy by the name of Dennis Passeretti. And Dennis Passeretti is one of George Pizzari's guys up in New England. And I'd read about him in Official Karate. And he's got this great big sign on the back, Kid Paz. And so I'm matched up with Kid Paz, first match. And back in those days, I don't know if they do anymore, but they would stop the stopwatch when the referees would call a break, right? So anyway, here we are. They say go. Kid Paz comes right across the ring. Pow! Right in the mouth. Now, I'm going back to the line. I'm thinking, okay. Oh, no. And I did a groin kick, and he punched me in the face. So I'm thinking, okay, I got the point for the groin kick, or I got the punch for the contact. Point for the contact. Okay, this is good. Point. Punch. He just got the point. Okay. Go back there. I do the same thing. Bam, low kick. Pow! He hits me in the mouth. This time, I'm doing this because he's cut my lip. And I'm thinking, okay, now I do have the point. I got him on the kick first. Bang! He hit me in the mouth. He drew blood. I've got the point. Point. Punch. it's 2-0, right? And these are 3-point matches. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I'm replaying the from the Wizard of Oz, where Dorothy's going, "It looks like we're not in Kansas anymore, Toto." And I think, man, I got to change up. Well, the thing that I knew about Kid Paz was when the referee said go, he came off the line. So I face him right leg forward. Referee says go. Wham! I hit him with a defensive side kick. Point Anderson. I line up left side forward. They say go. I hit him with a defensive spinning back kick. Point Anderson. We line up right side forward. They say go. Wham! Hit him with the right leg defensive side kick. I beat him 3-2. And that was how competition was. And see, and this was Texas. He drew blood. Well, that's a good point. That solidifies the point. And I tell everybody in Texas, I made my black belt in Oregon, but I became a black belt in Texas. Well, I end up, fighting in the finals that night. I was that close to fighting Bill Wallace for the championship, but it didn't happen. Roy Curbin got me, and then Roy got to fight him. But I established myself as a national presence at that time. So anyway, back then you had to bang somebody for a point. And the cool thing about it was that there wasn't all that much second punching because you knew what was coming. You know, if you, okay, 1977, up in the Pacific Northwest. In the words of Jerry Fontanez, I was a sniper fighter. I would bing, and I'd be out of there. Bing, I'd be out of there. And it was not uncommon for some yahoo to follow me out of bounds and whack me one as a second punch. If nothing else, I'd get the point, but then I'd get the lump. Well, I got tired of the comedy in 1977, and I thought, okay, anybody who second punches me is going down. I spent a year getting disqualified, discouraging people from second punching me. And there was even a guy that watched me do this who mentioned to a buddy of mine, Fred King, says, wow, I didn't know Danny could hit hard. And now Freddie and I had trained together for a number of years. And he goes, well, what do you think he could do? Well, the thing was, I never did it, not in the ring. But at this point in time, it was okay. It was time to start making examples of people just so that they wouldn't put a lump on me after the point was called or after a break was called. This was how point fighting was. Jeff Smith, okay. You didn't play Jeff Smith like that because Jeff would put a tattoo on your head. Howard Jackson. You didn't play Howard like that because Howard would beat a tattoo on your head. And a lot of the top fighters at that point in time played nice. You know, they played point fighting. They were strong. It was a rough and tumble match, but they didn't go out and bust up people, but they could. And this was the era in which I grew up in. Now, you fast forward to 1980 or so, and the first of the major rule changes start to come into play. Okay, you can't kick to the groin, and which encouraged a lot of people to get into the double and triple and quadruple kicks, et cetera, et cetera. And by the time I got off of the competition scene, it was about 85, and it was heading that direction. Now, let's fast forward to about 3 or 4 years ago when I was in the Battle of Atlanta, and we'll tell the difference between point fighting then and point fighting now, and then I'll give you my own view on it. So I'm at the Battle of Atlanta. I'm watching the light heavyweight ring, and I basically got nothing to do. I went there for an awards thing and see my old buddies. And I see these two fighters, and this one guy, they go out of bounds, and this one guy, boom, 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 just pace this other guy 3 times, right? Wham, wham, wham. And the referees break up. They bring them back up, and they start going again. Well, later on, Pat Burleson's #1 student now. I don't know if you know who Pat Burleson is, but he was the first national karate champion, and his nickname was the meanest man in America. And Jamie Cashin, you know, he comes up to me and he goes, Mr. Anderson, could you tell me the difference between, you know, how you fought in the day and the fighting now? And I said, well, Jamie, you were over at the light heavyweight ring, right? He says, yeah. I says, well, you remember that guy was fighting the guy in the gray gi and they went out of bounds and he hit him 3 times? And he goes, yeah. I said, what did you see? Oh, wow. Well, they were fast and were strong and it was good strong. Yeah. Uh-huh. And after he hit it, what did you see? Well, they started the match up again. I go, yeah, right. Okay, now, let me tell you what I saw. This guy took him out of bounds. He hit him full out 3 times in the face. No reaction. That guy wasn't stunned. That guy wasn't dropped. They walked back into the center of the ring. And what did they do? They continued the match. I said, now, let's put it in this frame of reference. What would Mr. Burleson have done if somebody had hit him 3 times in the face out of bounds after the call of break? And he gets this look on his face like this, oh my God, look. I go, right. That's the difference between my era and the current era. And he goes, oh, I understand. And now when I mentioned about the crabby old man, I used to crab about this. I used to crab about this a lot, but Mike Genova put it in terrific perspective when he said to me, look, Dan, the game we played is not the game that's being played these days. It's not the same game. And it's like, okay, yeah, I could resonate with that. Now, when I take a look at today's fighters, one of the things I am like thoroughly impressed by is the athleticism. The athleticism and the mobility and the timing are very, very good. What I miss is an old student of mine, Tim Gustafson, had a great way of putting things. And, you know, they don't put any stank on their punches and their kicks. You know, there's no stank on it. With, you know, going back to the old control is wrist deep. And the top fighters, I saw them bust some people up here and there, just enough to get them to mind their manners and play the game. But, you know, it's like that. To me, that's the big difference. And I'm sure if there's any modern day fighters, they're going to crab about this. They're going to say, oh, no, it's not that way, yada, yada, yada. But this is my perception, and I'm sticking by it. How's that?
No, and I appreciate that. And, you know, and I heard some of the same kind of things, you know, before Jim Harrison passed away, when I had opportunities to interact with him and, you know, wrote a couple things for Black Belt for him and, you know, on him and so forth. But, you know, hearing some of the stories from back then, it was different, you know, and some people say better, some people might say not better, but it was definitely different, you know.
Well, yeah, you know, the technical facility kept going upwards. I mean, when I grew up in an era that every other week somebody was coming up with something new. You know, somebody come up with the low high round kick, you know, the groin kick and the head kick with the round kick. Well, the next week they learn how to counter that. The next week they learn how to counter that. And so the technical growth was amazing. But the founders, they fought. You know, I remember, you know, I did not get to see Mr. Harrison in person. Never got to see him fight. But there's two things that I knew him by reputation, right? And there's two encounters that are just near and dear to my heart. One of was the 73 U.S. Championships, where I won the lightweight division. I'd won over Demetrius Avanis, who is the Golden Greek. Nobody beats the Greek in Texas. I got him in Texas. Well, I'm warming up for the next team matches the next day, and Mr. Harrison, he's walking by, and without breaking stride, he looks right straight at me. He goes, "I saw you last night, kid. You did good." And coming from him, now this guy, if anybody doesn't know about Jim Harrison, this guy was the guy that the SWAT guys called when things got tough. I mean, this guy was like blaster fighter from way back. And I'm going, whoa. Because when he fixed his eyes on me, I mean, they had this like, your ass is mine stare. You know? I mean, he could be in a good mood, and he gave you that look, and it turned your blood to ice. Well, anyway, there was that compliment. And then the last time that I saw him was at when Keith Vitale and Bruce Brucci and Mike Geneva and Hans Gerhard Hintz received their 10th dons from Mr. Alain Steen. And I was doing a seminar, and Mr. Harrison walked in. And whoever was with Mr. Harrison came up and asked me, you know, could we take a timeout so he could introduce Mr. Harrison? And I go, says, we'll do the timeout, but I will do the introduction. And so I stopped the seminar and I said, okay, you will see a lot of seniors at this event, but I'm here to tell you that seniors have their seniors. And Texas is known for being a rough and tumble. Well, this particular person, who's my senior, was rougher and tumbler. May I introduce Mr. Jim Harrison? I pointed at everybody. So I go, good, face him. Good. Attention. Bow. Boom. Sir, with your permission, may I continue? He nods and says yes. And I continue the seminar. Afterwards, I go up to him and I, shake him because I'm teaching, so I don't want to get into a big conversation with him or whatever. But when I'm done, I go over, sir, it's good to see you here and so forth. And he goes, That's got to be the nicest introduction anybody's ever given me. And then saying, thank you, sir. And so one of the things that I think the difference between also the modern day fighters and the older fighters is that we knew our roots. I did not fight with Mr. Harrison. I'm alive to show you that I didn't fight with Mr. Harrison. I didn't fight Fred Wren. I didn't fight Alan Steen. I didn't fight Shotgun Billy. I didn't match with a number of these guys. But oh, did I know who they were? Oh, absolutely. You know, there's a number of guys. I've got to make it to New York during Ki Wang Kim's event because there's a lot of old school Taekwondo guys that I know about that I've never met. And so, you know, before I leave, Super Dan's got to go back east and go, Mike Warren, man, I've heard nothing but great. Gerald Robbins, Joe Hayes, you guys have heard nothing but great stuff about. I had to meet you. So, but yeah, the last thing, all this coach's intervention and timeouts for, the guy to coach you, etc., or the soccer parents. Criminy sakes. All this being allowed in a martial arts tournament. No, when you stepped in the ring, you were on your own. There was nobody yelling off to the side. Okay, 10-minute timeout break. Hey, the guy drops his lead hand. You had to figure that out on the fly. Soccer parents. Alan, honest to Pete, this happened to me and this killed me on martial arts tournaments. I only go to like one or two, and it's because they're close friends of mine that are putting them on. So I go to visit my friend instead of enjoy the tournament. But I'm chief refereeing, and this is probably about 10 years ago or so. I'm chief refereeing a kids division, and the contact is getting out of hand. So I pull the guys together. So look, guys, contact getting out of hand. I'm going to start knocking off points. I'm going to start disqualifying people. So you guys have got to lighten up. Now, one of the guys in the ring was one of my guys. Well, we get down to first place and we run off and I go off. This parent comes up to me, and honest to goodness, this guy would have made a Marine drill sergeant proud with how he cussed me out. I mean, he lit me up, and he's this little guy, and it's words, so I can't hit him. And he goes on for about 5. I'm honest to be, it felt like an hour. It's probably 2 to 3 minutes. I was going to say 5 minutes, probably 2 to 3 minutes. But he is just lighting me up left, right, and center on how I introverted his kid. And his kid lost because I was da-da-da-da-da. And insert every cuss word and insert every insult with a cuss word. And this is at a karate tournament. Now, how was I raised? Let me tell you a funny story. Because it's back to me. You asked me a question. I'll go on and on. I'm a green belt. Back in the days when the white belt division was white through green. I am in the quarterfinals. If I win this match, I'm going on for first place. I fight this guy. Bang, he hits me in the arm with a side kick. Okay. He gets a point. We're out there. He hits me in the arm with a side kick. The chief referee calls point. I go, he hit me in the arm. Next word out of his mouth was disqualified. I had talked back to a referee. Wham! I was out of there. And it's like, oh, that's how I was raised. So when it came to, and I was really good at manipulating judges. In fact, I'll get to this in a moment. This is really bad. But whenever I manipulated judges, it was always in a cheeky mood or it was always in a humorous way. But at the same time, if they told me to knock it off, I knocked it off as opposed to complaining about this or that. So, okay, segue into things I'm proud of or not proud of. You know, this whole thing of hitting the person raising your hand, that was me. Something that I would do in competition, I did in national competition, was I would hit the person, I'd raise my hand and I'd yell, got him. Now, If that didn't convince the judge, the next time I had hit and I raised my hand and I yelled, "Got him again." That always got me the point. I remember back in Baltimore, Maryland, top 10 nationals, they did not allow the spine as a target. So I hit the guy, I raised my hand and I yelled, "Kidney." I got the point. Now, it has gotten to the point where, you know, the person will not even complete the punch and raise their hand, etc. So I'm a little embarrassed about starting that. All the flash uniforms. I was the first guy to wear a t-shirt in the ring. I wore a football jersey that had an iron-on, as I was known as Super Dan. And if you look at the photos of the 1979 Diamond Nationals, everybody's in a karate gi. I've got my blue pants on and my white Superman symbol, which the next thing is Larry Kelly is wearing a red t-shirt, sometimes with no belt, and then whoom, it just goes on from there. So, you know, a couple of fads that I started, and oh, here's another important point in history. I was the first karate person to be nicknamed in the karate magazines. And that was started off as a joke. I was nicknamed Super Dan before Bill became Superfoot. And the writer of the article knew that I liked comics. So she wrote up, "And young Super Dan Anderson, as he is widely becoming known in the Pacific Northwest." And I'm looking at this and go, nobody's calling me this. I am not. And I get cranky, and her attitude was, "Buck up, Uncle Buck, man, live with it." And I hated that nickname until somebody in the tournament comes, "Hey, Super Dan." But it was said as almost like a handle, a nickname. And it was said with respect. And it's like, oh, I've got a handle. Imagine that. And I was known as Super Dan ever since. But, you know, before Bill Superfoot Wallace, before Howard Jackson, California Flash, before Jeff Smith, the DC Bomber, nickname-wise, there was Super Dan. So, but three famous first. How's that?
That's awesome. And we're just about out of time, and I have so many more questions I'd like to ask. We're definitely going to have you back on again. But as we close up here, you know, this will be hosted on enjoylifesafely.com. That's my main website. Can you share with the folks briefly about something you can go out and enjoy, and a little tip on staying safe while doing it? And we got 5 minutes left. So
5 minutes. Okay. Oh gosh. Something you could enjoy. Well, I will get into that. Okay. Two things that I enjoy. Number one is that about 5 years ago, my wife bought me a Can-Am Spider. Now, this is a 3-wheeled motorcycle, 2 wheels in the front, 1 in the back. And I absolutely enjoy wind therapy. You know, and that is something that you'd have to, you know, this is where my spider senses come out, so to speak. My martial arts senses come out because, you know, you're on the road, you're traveling. And my viewpoint on that, and this is also the same thing with travel. You know, my wife loves to travel, go visit places. So I usually do all the driving. And I look at it as a, you know, if you have a box of marbles and you have your eye on one marble and you start moving the box, all the marbles move in relation to the box. Well, that's how I view driving. And so, as opposed to, oh, I've got to watch out for other drivers. No, I'm intermixing and interconnecting with all the other drivers. And it's funny because it makes me more aware without having the fear injection, so to speak. You know, I've got to watch out for nut drivers. No, I'm intermingling with these, interacting with these other drivers. And okay, yeah, this one's getting too close, so I'm going to go over here, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the first way that I look at in terms of safe travel and so forth, whether on the Spider or on the car. Now, the other thing is that I had mentioned earlier that I picked up an instrument which is called a touch guitar, which is tapping instead of plucking. And if you enjoy the journey, and that's the key thing, enjoy the journey, enjoy the learning process. Anything that is frustrating, you can also have fun with. And it's the same thing as in a profession. My wife is a quilter. She is an artista. She's not even an artist. She's an artista. But she bought a second, just think big ass sewing machine. It's called a long arm, but it's computerized. So I have learned how to run the computerized long arm. Yes, you can advertise me as the world's deadliest quilter. And, but the journey on that, again, another white belt thing. So it's in anything that you do, if you look at interacting with, I think your intention is going to be broader. And then if you enjoy the journey, decide to enjoy the journey, which means enjoying the frustration, revel in the frustration. One of the things I tell my students, and I'll keep this really, really quickly, is that if you're having a really crappy night, and I have had really, really horrible nights sparring, revel in how bad it is, because it's going to get better. So you revel in how much you really stink up the joint, because it can only go up from there. And so I think if you do anything for enjoyment, and this is even, going to a bad concert, know that the next concert has got to be better. The next book, man, this book sucks. I can't put it down because it goes against my grain of not finishing a book, but man, I sure hope I can finish this quickly, because I got to get on to the next book. Or. So I hope that answers the question.
No, that is awesome. And I want to thank you very much for joining me today. And I definitely do want you to come back again, because I have more things that we never got to today, but I think you shared some really great stuff.
Oh, thank you.
Appreciate that. I appreciate everybody watches. Share this out, share the links out with people, let other people see this as well. Visit enjoylifesafely.com, get that newsletter, and I will be back tomorrow to talk about books. And one last time, thank you, Dan, for joining us today and sharing a bunch of the wisdom.
My pleasure. My coffee with Alain.